Hello and welcome to another edition of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast, your home for all the latest Minnesota Lynx and WNBA news, analysis, and coverage. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. I'm your host, Mitchell Hansen, and we officially have a WNBA Finals matchup with two teams left standing. The top-seeded New York Liberty and the second-seeded Minnesota Lynx will face off in the WNBA Finals. For the Minnesota Lynx, it's their first time since 2017 reaching the WNBA Finals. That year was, if you recall, a pretty solid year for Minnesota, only claiming their fourth championship in 7 years. But Minnesota will be returning to the championship series for the first time as I mentioned, since 2017, so first time in 7 years. While New York, they're currently 0-5 all-time in the WNBA Finals and are coming off of a finals loss last year. Against the Las Vegas Aces, who won back-to-back titles. But this matchup will be a lot of fun. This matchup will be an entertaining one where, two teams that put together some entertaining battles throughout the year. Minnesota, these two teams actually played 4 times throughout the year, one being the Commissioner's Cup Championship, which Minnesota won. But outside of that, these teams played 3 games this year. Or over the course of the regular season this summer, and Minnesota won 2 out of those 3 games. So if you consider all 4 of the games, including the Commissioner's Cup Championship, Minnesota's kind of had New York's number, winning 3 out of those 4 games. In the 3 regular season games, in particular, Minnesota did a great job at really what they've done well all season long. They've really they've done well with shooting from deep, defending. They owned kind of both of those areas against the Liberty, as well as distributing the ball. When the Lynx offense, when they're moving the ball around, when they're distributing, when they're sharing, they're a very dangerous team, and they're very spread out and can kind of attack you from a couple different ways. But with that said, on the other side of things, New York is the exact same way. New York can light it up from deep. They obviously have the likes of Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, John Carl Jones. They're very, very talented. They're very deep. They have, some nice depth coming off the bench, as Minnesota does. But it will be a very entertaining matchup. It's the top 2 teams in the league throughout the regular season. This is what we all hoped would happen. This is all what everybody kind of predicted will happen. And if you go to canasupis.com, you'll find my story about the finals and Minnesota returning to the finals for the first time since 2017. But I also dive into kind of a preview of the matchup between these two teams and kind of what we've seen so far, how they've performed against each other. And then at Winsidr.com, you'll find my prediction with Miles Ehrlich, who is a former podcast guest. We dive into the preview for this series, as well as X factors, our bold predictions, and so forth and so on. So go check all of that out, and not only at the beginning of as the finals begins, but throughout the finals, because it'll be a fun series. I think it's a series that's going to go to 5 games, and I think that it will be one of the more entertaining finals that we've had in the past few years. So really looking forward to the finals. But with that said, this is kind of a special edition Hitting the Hardwood podcast. Most of the time we've kind of stuck to a regular schedule here with Hitting the Hardwood with this podcast, but the finals is an exception. We're going to do a special edition here this week where we look at the finals, we preview the finals, and we talk about these two teams that are going to be matching up, that being the Liberty and the Lynx. And while doing that, I am really excited to be joined somebody that's been on the podcast a few different times, but somebody who's a Minnesota native, somebody who likes talking Lynx basketball, and likes talking WNBA basketball as well. So it's a lot of fun talking to this individual. But Aryeh Schwartz from Winsidr, who I work alongside at Winsidr, is joining me on the podcast this week to break down, as I mentioned, the finals and kind of talk about where teams have been leading up to this point, how they've been performing as of late. And then, like I said, we jump into how they match up and ultimately what we think will happen in this series. So without further ado, let's jump right into the podcast with Aryeh. Aryeh, how are you doing, man?
Dude, The Lynx are in the finals. Like, first of all, let's let's give a little credit is due. As when the preseason moves were happening, one of us questioned, one of us bought in. And if there's anything that we've learned from the Lynx this season, it's when you buy in, great things happen. So I want to give you some props for preseason predictions. They would be a top three team. You might have even said top two. I know it was definitely top three.
I know it was for sure top three. I don't know if it was top two or not. I thought that this team, the pieces they brought in, I just thought fit this team really well, and that ended up being the case. I mean, the Courtney Smith and Courtney Williams and Alana Smith have been phenomenal, and it's been a fun year. But like you said, it first of all, it's crazy to believe that, and I say this in every single podcast, I think, but it's crazy to believe we're already to the finals. But it's also kind of crazy to think that the Lynx are here. They're the preseason number, 9 seed or whatever that they slotted or whoever slotted them at
I
in
I have so
preseason.
much shame towards that only because like I totally get it. It's poster board material.
Hmm.
You put it up in the locker room, inspire the team. I get it. I also feel like WNBA fans who follow the league intensely and closely when they and take away like I understand there was great names included in making that list, but
Right.
in general, maybe I'm just speaking for myself. When it comes to WNBA coverage, I don't exactly hear the four letters of that major sports partner of the WNBA and think to myself, oh wow, their content is amazing content. I don't think to myself, oh, they seriously know what they're talking about when it comes to power rankings and things like that. I think there's better outlets for that, but hey, that's maybe why I started my own.
That's why people should go to Winsidr and Winsidr.com.
And we got a preview ready. So by the time you listen to
Absolutely.
this, the playoff preview is ready. So check it out, or the finals
Absolutely.
preview.
Absolutely. Before we jump into the finals, let's kind of just take a little bit of a step back and look at obviously we know what happened in the first round. Minnesota swept Phoenix, but more so with the semifinals. It was a back and forth series. It was, it seemed like at points the series could have teetered either way, and Minnesota, I think kind of put their foot in the ground in game three and didn't let that happen. But what were your thoughts on and this series and also the kind of dominating game five for Minnesota.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think first and foremost, if you're in the Minnesota camp, you have to like the path you've taken to get to the finals
Hmm.
because you start the playoffs going up against Phoenix, a team that, look, no one's going to talk about them as a contender this year, but they have that star power. You could argue they are a super team when you combined a top point guard in the league, all defensive first second team nomination, who's won a championship. When you take Kalia Copper, who is a electric superstar who's won a championship, a Diana Taurasi, you know, Rebecca Allen and a Brittany Griner. Like looking at that team on paper, if healthy, yeah, they're a contender, but they weren't this season.
Hmm.
But at least Minnesota got to kind of get their sea legs under them in these playoffs, going up against a high power, star power team that, no, they were not favored, but at least you had that element. And then the next series, and they gave them a shellacking. And then the next series, you go up against Connecticut. And I've been saying this to anybody who's been listening to me. It felt to me that the Maisha Hines Allen trade was a trade meant specifically for a series, and
Hmm.
not just any series, but a series against the Connecticut Sun. I'm not saying that Reeve was sitting there going, "Oh, we're definitely going to play them in the playoffs," but I think Reeve was smart enough to sit there and go, "We can add one player, not really lose much, but we can add one player who," and I was critical of the move. But we can add one player who adds an element this team does not have, a player who can buy into a system. And I think it worked wonders in that Connecticut series. Mai Shines Allen didn't have the craziest numbers during the series. She didn't have the craziest minutes, but her minutes were extremely impactful, having a physical body that could go up blow for blow with Alyssa Thomas, with the physicality of, look,
Hmm.
you talk about the Connecticut Sun and we think Alyssa Thomas, but everybody on that roster plays physical basketball. When you go to Connecticut, you learn how to play physical basketball. So for Minnesota to go from that star power team with Phoenix, who, look, some people were sitting there going, can Phoenix pull it off? Could Phoenix amaze or do something? And then move on to a gritty, bite, claw, tooth, whatever it takes to win series against Connecticut. And now, like, the only negative I see from those early playoff matchups is that maybe they're a little tired. Maybe
Mhm.
what we saw with Vegas against New York and what we saw, in my opinion, with Connecticut against New York is running out of gas. And to me, running out of gas is just, nature's way of saying the better teams won
Mhm.
because Vegas ran out of gas because to beat New York, they were going to have to sustain playing their best basketball of the season for a prolonged period of time against the best team in the league. For Minnesota, it's that sustained physicality and then a less of a break before the next series. I mean, it's very different if Minnesota finishes this in 4, has a few more days of rest, and then New York finishes in 5 and has 1 day of rest. So
Mhm.
I think those are kind of my thoughts. And also, like, I know this is a Lynx centric pod, but man, the Connecticut Sun, talk about a team that just can't get in the champion's
Yeah.
house. They
They
just,
just
they knock, knock, knock.
they can't crack that code, and I don't know what it is. I mean, you look at the move, like they made a great move at the deadline. They got Marina Mabrey, like that should have pushed them over the hump, and 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 then obviously she gets hurt in game 5, and that impacts game 5. But it's just things like that that just always there's always something that happens to them, which is unfortunate, but um, yeah, it's crazy. I was kind of, as you were talking about what we saw this year, specifically with, Maisha Hines-Allen, and you could even throw Alana Smith into that, just the kind of physicality in the paint. That's something Minnesota did not have last year. And that's something that hurt them specifically in the series against Connecticut that ended their season last year. I mean, this is not a knock on Dorka Juhas, but that's really all you had in the paint. And, I'm just looking at, Alyssa Thomas's numbers from last year. She had, 25 or 15 and 10, 26 and 8, 28 and 12. Like she had crazy numbers in that series against Minnesota in 2023. And this year she was good, but that Minnesota was able to hold her in check. And in a series when it's that, this close and it can sway either way, that's huge. And that's something that, that's fed into Minnesota's defense at large is just the additions that they brought in. And then the other thing too is, I didn't realize how big of a role Courtney Williams was going to play in the playoffs. She was huge in that semifinal series. When she
Huge.
was off, that Minnesota did not look good. I mean, whether she was in foul trouble or she's just struggling from the field, whatever it may be. But when she was on, man, they just look unstoppable. And that's something that kind of caught me off guard. I didn't expect that, especially with seeing, what they and she didn't have a bad year by any means, a bad regular season, but I just didn't expect it to be that big of an impact in the playoffs. And
She
she
really
was
lives
huge
for
in
that
that.
moment.
She does. She is I felt like just listening to her talk, I felt like I could go run through a wall last night. Just
Right?
she's the
Oh my
ultimate
God.
hype person. She's great. But
She
I
needs
could
to
listen
bring
to her
back
talk.
the WNBA vest, the vest that I wanted so bad
Yeah.
that my wife and everybody was like, you cannot do that. You would look ridiculous. And then like thinking about it after the game, I literally went online to look for it. And I was like, Anna, my wife, it's only $5. It's on sale for $5. She's like, why are you spending? And it was sold out, so obviously whatever. But I was elated because she better bring it back. That's a style icon. She's a style icon. Two things you mentioned that kind of popped in my head. One, while watching the game, shout out to my wife, or watching the series, she asked me a question, and I'm curious your take on this. She asked me who I think the toughest player in the W is. And obviously, you're watching
Mhm.
Connecticut. You think Alyssa Thomas. She's got the injuries. She's the battle, the physicality, the blah, 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 the this. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, honestly, it really matters how you define it because you look at a Jackie Young who is so physically like she's an unmovable object almost.
Mhm.
And then you look at somebody like an Alana Smith who has at times been going up against, for the most part, she's an undersized player going up against much larger, very physical. Like she takes a beating.
Hmm.
She looks like a boxer fighting up a weight class, and somehow, she's floating like a butterfly, stinging like a bee, but she's also dealing blows. And so I was kind of sitting there, and maybe it was because it was, that matchup going on. I was like, damn, Alana Smith, man, like she's gotta be up there for that. What do you think?
I honestly, yes, I agree with that. I also, when you first started talking about that, I kind of thought of Marina Mabrey as far as
Ah,
just kind of her grittiness. Um, she kind of reminds me of, man, almost like a kind of like a Diana Taurasi. Like she's willing to do whatever it takes, and she's willing to try and get under the skin of her opponents, and however necessary or however she can do that. She tries to do, and it didn't work for Minnesota just because more often than not it was going up against Courtney Williams, and Courtney Williams I think can probably trash talk anybody in the WNBA.
oh my God, dude. The quote, what was the quote, whatever, from Courtney about like asked after game 3 or 4, whatever it was, like what was that exchange? First of all, I've been saying this for years and I'll say it again. Mitchell, I know you got connections throughout the dub. Um, Give me a league pass alternative. I will pay extra money for the uncensored. I want to hear the shit talk. I want to hear the crap that goes on because it's so amazing. And especially in the playoffs, I think because we're getting more cameras, because we're getting more replays and more focus on it and more media attention. Like,
Hmm.
let's be real. When it comes to WNBA playoff basketball, especially in the semis and the finals, we start to see what regular season, and excuse my language, meaningless games coverage should be.
Hmm.
Like, we see the content that comes out of these playoff games with a Courtney Williams and a Marina Mabrey, and I just wish we had that type of coverage from the four-letter major sports leagues coverage and other places that are giving the attention and like because that's the fun part.
Yeah,
Women's basketball players also talk smack.
right. Let's get rid of the coaches in-game interview and let's do mic'd up players.
There we go.
Let's do
There
that.
we go. I think everyone wants that. The other thing I was going to say is also really great aspect of last night's game for Minnesota against Connecticut, or whenever you listen to it, game 5,
Hmm.
was you talked about Alyssa Thomas's crazy numbers in the playoff matchup last season. In this season, yeah, she had some great games, no doubt. But last night, I believe I heard towards the end of the game, Alyssa Thomas didn't score in the second half. Didn't make a shot in the second half. And
Hmm.
to me, it was a combination of two things. One, Minnesota putting their foot to the pedal early on, not letting Connecticut get back close enough to the part where Alyssa Thomas's style of gameplay could truly be effective to bring them back into the game. It got to a point where Minnesota and probably Alyssa Thomas was like, let Alyssa Thomas shoot because 2 points aren't going to make you get this comeback. You can't be trading blow for blow with us while we're hitting a three every once. You needed the back-to-back DeWanna Bonner big threes. You needed a Marina Mabrey. You needed a Ty Harris, and they just didn't have enough shooting. And that's props to Minnesota for getting to that position in the game where you can then relax a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It was kind of, I'm just looking at as you're talking, I'm looking at Alyssa Thomas's numbers too, and like she she didn't like she had a good series, but not the Alyssa Thomas that we know. Like it wasn't dominant, like she always is. She seems like she always is. And in game five, she had 7 points, 6 assists, 3 rebounds. Like
That
you
is
know,
a ridiculously like low.
yeah, and
Anyone listening to this,
six
I'm
shot
sure knows.
attempts.
That's absurd, right?
Yeah,
Alyssa Thomas is a walking double double of like 15 and 12 or 12 and 15, and
right.
she's probably going to get somewhere close with either rebounds or assists to a triple double. That's what she
Hmm.
does. To
Hmm.
hold her to under 10 in all of those categories is absurd and is honestly not being talked about enough. Like, yes, Connecticut lacked shooting, and they were kind of set behind the eight ball, as it were, in this matchup because
Yeah.
I think Minnesota was built to take on the top three teams in this league after the Maisha Hines Allen, also Connecticut more so, but like they were built to take on the Liberty and the Aces. And so, you know, the reason, in my opinion, that Connecticut has faltered in these past years is because they've been trying to like perfect what they've been doing for the past 5, 6 years, 7 years, as opposed to other teams are chasing the top teams. Connecticut was kind of lost in this fog of like their own greatness and not understanding that like if you want to beat the Liberty, if you want to beat Vegas, you have to do what Minnesota did, which is get shooters. You need to
Mhm.
be able to last shooting with them because I mean, were you surprised when Connecticut scored over 90 and beat Minnesota?
Kind of. I,
I
I,
was.
yeah, just with how I thought this was going to be an extremely low scoring series, just with how good both teams are defensively and how they live and die by the three. Yes, I was very surprised.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was just like you couldn't have you. I think like on the pod with on my pod with Rachel, we even like said at one point like you can't expect, and it was probably right before they scored 90, but we are like, you can't expect Connecticut to score 90 on Minnesota. Like,
Hmm.
and it may, it happens, right? But
Right.
that's not what you see in a series, which is the difference between a single elimination or the Commissioner's Cup or, a regular season matchup is in the playoffs, it's not about one game. In the
Hmm.
playoffs, in a series, it's about who is the better team and who can have the consistency for multiple games.
Hmm. Yeah. It's the beauty of a playoff series is that constant chess match and the back and forth. That's my personal favorite part because you don't see the same team or the same performance twice.
Oh, yeah.
It's a
Well,
game of adjustments, and I love it.
you do from Fee.
Well,
25 and 10, 3 games in a row,
that is true. She is
which,
playing unreal.
and I don't, maybe it's because I want my own words to go viral, but when I watch her, and I've said this before, but when I watch her, it's like watching a chess master
Hmm.
because anytime a defender gets in a position or shuts down one of her options, she knows the rebuttal. She knows the counter. And it is so frustrating for defenders to try and track her off ball, to track her when she does get the ball, to track her in transition. Like she is just a player that it so often, and I think it's hard for, and I know I struggled with this early on in my coverage of the W, but like these players are so intelligent. Their ability to, understand which leg the defender's weight is on, which direction the player's weight is leaning, which players are weaker when the weight is on that side of their body versus
Hmm.
the other, so we can take advantage on the amount of things that their eyes and brain compute in a split second and then react to through their training is beyond impressive, and it feels like Nafisa Collier is just on a different plane, a different level, an Asia Wilson-esque level, but it's a
Hmm.
little bit different because it's not done in like Asia Wilson, there's like a physical dominance to it. With Fee,
Right.
there's almost a finesse to it.
Yeah. And how many times have you watched, and it's happened to me countless times, but how many times have you been watching a Lynx game or even in the playoffs been watching and I mean, Fee plays almost every minute, but then you look at the box score in the third quarter and then you're like, holy crap, she has 25 and 12. Like when did that happen? Like
When did she
obviously,
score 29 in that loss?
right. And last night she had 4 blocks. Like, yes, I've noticed those, but it's like to your point, it's she's just so I don't want to say underrated or under the radar, but at the same time she is. It's just I've never seen really anything like it as far as just being able to just, casually throw up 25, 10, 4 and 4 or whatever in a night. Like it's unbelievable what she's able to do and what she's able to do, like Cheryl Reeves said after Game 5 consistently, is quite remarkable. It's unbelievable. She's taken her game. She had an MVP caliber season, and she is doing even better in the playoffs, which is kind of hard to believe and to really think about. But
It's freaking
she's been great.
crazy, man. It's
Yeah.
it's just wild. And you look at her ascension over the past few years of okay, like she started off great, but can she get better? And she got
Mhm.
a little bit better, and her defense started to get better. And her 3-point shot was always a question mark.
Hmm.
And, how can she find ways to score in bulk? I think that was my biggest question mark for Fee over the past few years. It like yeah, we could get specific and say the three ball, but it was more so like, can you find a way as a player to consistently score in bulk? And I mean these 25 and 10 games. I mean scoring consistently around the 20 mark and then on a random night drop a 40, drop a
Hmm.
35. And she's done that.
Hmm.
And there's no question about it. And she's done it. I mean, what was it at one point? The runs that Minnesota, not just Fee, but Minnesota players have had throughout the season. Kayla McBride's early season shooting like 53, 54% from the 3-point line.
Right.
Fee shooting like 70% on like a 4 or 5 game stint.
Hmm.
And like, so I forget what was it? You know,
Yeah, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. Yeah, she was unbelievable. You could even throw in Bridget Carlton, her
her shooting,
insertion into the starting lineup, and then just her big shots at the end of games. Commissioner's Cup, a couple different games towards the end of the year. The Connecticut game that was at the end of the regular season that kind of clinched the second seed for Minnesota. I mean, it's at various moments, even in games. I mean, there's in the semifinal series alone. I mean, you had a game where, let's say in game five, for example, Courtney Williams starts the game off fast, scores, let's say, 5 points, I think it was right away. Then Kayla McBride hits a couple threes, 6 straight points. Then Fee comes in and scores seven straight. And it's just the spread out attack in the runs from different players. And that's not only just in game, but that happened all season long. It's crazy. I mean, this team is the true definition of a team, and that's what wins championships. And they have the star power and the firepower, but they also just they mesh so well, and that's
freaking
maybe even
well,
more
man.
impressive. Are you a fantasy sports fan looking for something different? Welcome to Fantasy Sports Evo, a completely new way to play daily fantasy sports. This is not just your average DFS app. With Evo, you pick teams, not players, to build your lineup. You heard that right, teams. Their team-based platform brings fantasy sports to a whole new level. Casual sports fans will like their simplified platform, and diehard fantasy players will enjoy playing in addition to their current platform of choice. Evo is for everybody. Evo is largely managed by a group of women who had previously found traditional fantasy sports too time-consuming. With Evo's streamlined approach, DFS is more accessible to everyone. Fantasy Sports Evo is licensed and available in 28 states and Canada. Download the app today and use the promo code LYNX, LYNX, to receive a 100% deposit match plus $10 payable credit. Fantasy Sports Evo is the next evolution of fantasy sports. Give it a try today. Must be a legal gambling age of located where Evo is available. Please play responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Kind of looking ahead to what we have ahead now. We have two teams left, as we mentioned, Minnesota, New York. What do you think initially of that series and the star power that's featured on both sides?
Yeah, look, I'm gonna be real. I think Minnesota was a team built to take on New York and Vegas. Like I said, I think Reeve maybe like there's so many layers of what Minnesota, shout out to Claire, shout out to Reeve. Um, what they were able to do this offseason, I think, was really impressive because New York and Vegas are not the same team.
Hmm.
Um, and so the ability for them to kind of plan ahead and understand that like we need a team that can take on Vegas, but also New York, because it was kind of clear that like odds are Vegas is not going to be able to three-peat, right? Like a lot of things had to go right. So for her to like think ahead and plan these layers, I think Minnesota is built to take on New York. I think there's only literally one thing that can stand in their way. And I'm not even just trying to say this because, I'm born and raised in Minnesota. The Lynx got me into basketball. I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast. I legitimately think the one thing that could stand in the Lynx way is last season. And when I say that, I mean because New York kind of feels like they're trying to write the end to their book, right?
Yeah.
I don't have any stats in front of me on this. I don't know if anybody has talked about this publicly or whatever, but like I would love to see the numbers of how teams do when they make it back to the finals after losing in the finals the year before. I mean, I'm trying to
Minnesota in
think back.
2017. I mean,
That was the one that
that's
came to mind.
yeah. After they lose in 2016, after that NECA Game 5, late game basket, they come back and they were a different team. And that revenge kind of seeking is hard to, try and limit and stop. And once you get a team that's collectively bought in that way, it's tough, and they're playing well at the same time. It's tough to face them.
The the two things that I have about that though. So play what? When it comes to basketball, I think Minnesota is the superior team. I think New York has been the better. Sorry, let me rephrase this so people understand what I'm trying to say. In this matchup, Minnesota is the better team. New York is the best team in the W. New York is the best team throughout the whole season. When I view playoffs, it's no longer, oh, whoever wins the finals does not mean you're the best team in the league because you didn't necessarily have to take on the toughest competition for you. Minnesota, I think, did take on their toughest competition. I think New York is now facing their toughest competition in the finals. Maybe that's a good thing for them. Maybe that's a bad thing for them.
Hmm.
Um, you know, we have seen like the difference between Minnesota in that back-to-back losing and then coming back the next year and winning it was they had won it before. So, and Lindsay Whalen talks about this all the time. The hunger for that championship is hard to recreate after you've won it once, so it's hard to repeat. And I think when you lose in the finals, you can kind of reignite that hunger if you've lost it. Whereas New York, yeah, like a couple of people on that team have won it. The majority haven't. So there you have a lot of hunger. You have a couple players. I'm thinking about John Jonquel Jones, a player who has made it deep many times, and has, as a team has struggled, not necessarily her specifically has struggled. She did at times when Alyssa Thomas came back, when she was Connecticut. She was probably the best player on the court for New York last year in the finals. But then you look at Minnesota, Natisha Hiedeman, Courtney Williams, Kayla McBride. Like they also have, and they have this youth movement too, but they also have these vet players who have experienced success in the playoffs, but not winning the championship.
Hmm.
And so I think you have like it's very easy, and this is kind of where I'm playing tug of war in my mind. It's very easy to say like New York, they were just there, they have the experience, some players have won it, and they have the hunger. That's a perfect combination. Minnesota hasn't been there yet with this team, but players on this team have. Players on this team have spent many years in this league trying to win a championship, and they have the hunger. Um, but I gotta say, a lot of WNBA teams would be real pissed to watch Minnesota win it all because they kind of like leapfrogged a few traditional steps to the championship.
Yeah, and there's one thing to be determined when you get to the finals. There's another thing to be experienced. And I think that, to your point, I think that that's where New York gets the advantage. Now, I wrote this in our preview at Winsidr, I believe it was that, or I included it in the parts that I wrote about, from a Lynx lens, that New York was the better team, maybe throughout the year. They were the better. Obviously, they finished with a better record. So if you want to based off that, they were the better team. Minnesota was better in the matchup between Minnesota and New York. Um, I mean, you just look at the three games that they played against each other, and I say three because I don't count the Commissioner's Cup
He
championship
doesn't count the Commissioner's Cup.
just
Okay,
because
no.
just because that to me, if it doesn't count towards the regular season game, it's hard to
Fair.
kind of count it. But obviously, it counts.
Do you
Minnesota ended up
wait,
winning.
do you view the sole win by New York differently because it was right after the Commissioner's Cup? Historically, teams that won the Commissioner's Cup struggle out of that, or like, it's a back to back. You have a little bit, you know what I mean? Because like
Yeah,
in that game, New York's more motivated to get the dub because they just lost to you
right.
in a game that doesn't count and in the realm of regular WNBA season like didn't happen. So it's like a weird.
Yeah. Yeah, and excuse me, I think if that game would have happened, that rematch or whatever after the Commissioner's Cup, if that would have happened even a week later, I think Minnesota, it's going to be a lot closer in that game,
Mhm.
I believe. But I mean, you just look at the matchups that these two now you kind of throw everything out of the window in the playoffs, especially when teams haven't played each other since the end of the regular season or whenever it may be. Um, but Minnesota's defense, not only in the playoffs, not only against every other team, but against New York, was impressive in the regular season. I mean, I'm just looking at the numbers. Minnesota held the Liberty to 38.2% from the field and 24.7% from three in the three games that they played against each other. And really the only advantage that New York had was on the boards and with turnovers. Minnesota had one more turnover than New York did on average per game, and then New York averaged just under a rebound more than Minnesota. So I mean, it's very similar to the Connecticut and Minnesota series where they're just so evenly matched. But I think that defensive aspect in Minnesota just being such a good defensive team, that alone will put them in a spot to potentially steal a game on the road. And that is obviously incredibly important when you don't have home court advantage. But going back to kind of the experience side of things, I think a way to get an advantage out of the experience or in that experience factor is doing what I just said, is stealing a game on the road. Stealing, if Minnesota can steal one or two on the road, I think they're going to be sitting in a pretty good spot. But because they're so tough to beat at home, and they're just a tough team to beat consistently. So I don't know. I go back and forth on what this series is going to do. I think it's going to go 5 games either way, um, but I don't know who's going to win.
Here's my question. I'm happy Minnesota opened up the upper bowl because when I when you watch, I hate that I have to bring this up. When you watch Chicago Sky games or Indiana Fever games, wherever they went, the crowd was crazy, which I
hmm
thought, neither of those teams are going to be legit championship contenders or real playoff contenders in my mind. Yes, one of them made the playoffs. I get that. But, I look at this team, or sorry, I look at those situations and I think to myself, how they were used to the crazy crowd. And
hmm
then New York. New York is the one team besides Vegas, it feels like. I mean, Phoenix gets a good crowd. Like there's other places that get good crowd, but New York sells out, and that's a big arena and it
Right.
gets super loud. I'm not sitting here and saying, oh, like Minnesota's gonna be shook by it. What I am saying is like I'm not, how do I word this politely to both fan bases? I'm curious if the larger amount of crowd noise that I expect in New York will give a little bit of a more of an advantage to New York versus
hmm
Minnesota, where like not that I think the crowd noise is going to have a huge, huge, huge impact on Minnesota, but I think it will have a larger impact on Minnesota than let's say in Minnesota it will have on New York.
Right.
That's my thought, and it's a curious aspect. I don't know how much of a percentage or whatever it impacts.
Yeah, the thing too we got to take into account with both of these teams, and it could be a factor of the crowd could be a huge factor, and that is they're both very tough beat at home. I mean, I think they had identical records if
Something like
maybe
that,
I'm
yeah.
correct in they tied for the best home record in the WNBA during the regular season. And I mean, they're just both so tough to top at home. That's why, I kind of lean towards it going to 5. Just because I think every team's going to take advantage of that home court until we get to that winner take all game 5, and then it's kind of anything goes in that game. But um, if right now entering the series, if you could predict, who do you think is going to win and in how many games?
So, I preface this with saying if I could predict, I would win lots of money. I should also preface it with saying like I did put money down on Minnesota to win it before the season started. So, Mitchell, you might have been, backing it with words. and buying in with words. Some of us bought in with money. No, the reason I did it, I
Hey,
put
if
ten
I could
dollars down.
bet Minnesota, I would. Well, I could do it somewhere else, but
Yeah, well, I don't know how to bet. I have a bookie, Danny Barlevy. No, so, actually though, no, I put money down because I found it very exciting and fun last year. And I'm not anyone who knows me, like my friends hit me up for like betting advice all the time. And I'm like, oh, you should pick this WNBA team. And I've yet to lose, except last year. Like, I've lost two WNBA bets. Two of them I didn't think were going to happen. And my third one that I might lose is the Lynx winning it all. But I had picked Fee for final or for WNBA MVP this year. I thought Asia was going to win it, but I thought there would be a better payout if Fee won it. And I
yeah,
thought that she would be number two, and she was. Um, I also put like $5 or $10 down on the Dallas Wings to win it all like early season last year. The payout for that would have been like north of 1,000, which is insane. And if I'm being real, I'm not about like doing smart picks. I'm about doing ones that will have hilariously large cash
yeah,
outs. Um, so I've been sticking with it, even though when I put the money down, I was doing it as a joke and I didn't think it was real. Going into the playoffs, Rachel and I talked about it. I picked Minnesota over New York in four. The reason I thought that was because now, granted, I also thought they were going to go 3-1 against Connecticut and have a little bit more rest. I'm looking at it now. I think Minnesota drops one in New York, the first one in New York, getting accustomed to that next level of play. We saw that in the Connecticut game. They weren't ready for understanding because they hadn't been there yet. The
hmm
next level of play in that playoffs, each round is different.
hmm
Um, and then I think Minnesota wins one in New York, wins one in Minnesota. But the more I think, I agree. I think it goes five. I'm gonna go five. Minnesota takes it in five, but it would be glorious if Minnesota could take it back home. But I just don't think New York is. I think New York's gonna be too prideful to lose one at home and not take one on the road.
Yeah, I agree. If I could lean anywhere or lean which way, I would actually do the same. I think that if I had to, if you held me down and made me choose, I would say Lynx in five.
I
But
made you watch Gary Anderson miss the Atlanta Falcons miss. No,
yeah,
that's the other thing is like and I know we're low on time, but I'm curious for you, like as someone who was born and raised in Minnesota and grew up a Minnesota sports fan, like I totally understand that I need to take off the Minnesota sports cap of like fandom of like I want this team to win because I want my family to be happy and I want Minnesota
hmm
sports to be, so I put that down. The part that I always triple, quadruple, five, whatever, octa, whatever, guess myself is the the Minnesota sports effect, which is your team is really good and then they just like let you down the moment you get confident in them. And now the Minnesota Lynx for 7 glorious years spat on that, played with fate for the last 5 years, whatever. It's been a different story, and I
hmm
think they've kind of fallen into the Minnesota. So, how do you, as a trustworthy, legit analyst, reporter, WNBA, Minnesota Lynx mind, but also Minnesota sports fan, separate the undeniable,
it's
like,
tough.
whatever?
It's tough. It's hard to put that aside because it's always in your mind, like, oh, what's going to happen? You always think that something's going to happen. Minnesota or the Lynx have kind of been an anomaly to that. I mean, they've, like you said, they've kind of, I don't know, put that to rest, but it's always there, as you know. It is always there. Cool. Well, Arya, I appreciate you joining. I appreciate you coming on and chatting a little links and doing it in such short notice. And looking forward to the WNBA finals and seeing what happens.
Appreciate you for having me. I know I'm not as cool as some of the big names you've gotten
Oh, come
recently,
on, come on.
but hey, honored to be here. Always down to chat for way too long about the Minnesota Lynx and just rant. It's always a good time.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon, man. Peace.
Thank you once again to Aryeh for joining the podcast this week. As I said before we started recording, it's a lot of fun talking basketball with him. He's somebody I could not only with the fact that he can relate to being a Minnesota native, being a Minnesota sports fan, that aspect of things. He's really knowledgeable and really fun to talk basketball with. So he's a good conversation, and I appreciate the conversation that we did have, and him taking the time to join me on short notice to get this podcast turned around so we could get it out before or as the finals is tipping off and beginning. I also want to give a shout out, as I do every week, to Jeremy Rushing for producing this podcast. Jeremy's been great over the last few years in this journey hitting the hardwood, and he does a lot of work on the back end. So I appreciate you, Jeremy, and everything that you do for hitting the hardwood. I also want to give a shout out to our three partners. You heard the Fantasy Sports Evo ad in the middle of the recording with Aryeh. Just to reiterate that, Fantasy Sports Evo, you can check them out at fantasysportsevo.com. And they are a daily fantasy sports app platform that is different than anybody else. Where you bet on teams and not players. It's a different aspect to betting that I personally hadn't explored much, but I really do enjoy it after getting to utilize this platform and get to know the folks at Fantasy Sports Evo. It's a lot of fun, and go check them out. If you if you visit us on Facebook, on social media, you'll find a URL or a link on there where you sign up and you get some free play money just by using the promo code LYNX, LYNX. And so if that's enough to push you over the edge, please do. Please go check them out and start using that app, because it is a lot of fun. They have a mobile-friendly app, an actual app, which is great. So please go check them out, Fantasy Sports Evo. Appreciate their support of Hitting the Hardwood. Also, to our other two partners who have been proud supporters of Hitting the Hardwood since day one. They've been along with us throughout this whole journey, that being Better Edge and Homage. Let's start with our good friends at Better Edge, BettorEdge, Edge.com. The Better Edge is similar to a lot of betting platforms, but they just do it better. They do a great job, not only including a lot of different sports, the same as Fantasy Sports Evo, but creating or including a lot of the different sports, including the WNBA, obviously. But the guys at Better Edge are outstanding people. It's a Minneapolis-based company. And they do a lot of great work, and they're very involved, and they're very strong supporters of women's basketball in general as well. So go check them out. If you visit bettoredge.com/links, use the promo code LYNX, LYNX, you get free $20 in free play. So as I said, check them out, bettoredge.com, Edge.com. Homage, HOMAGE.com. Homage is a vintage clothing store that does a lot of great modern and vintage WNBA gear, as well as any other sport that you want. They do a lot of promos, a lot of kind of giveaways throughout the year. They're doing a lot of promos during the WNBA playoffs. You can visit our website. If you go visit the Hitting the Hardwood website, you can find that on our social medias. Go to the Partners tab, and that's where you'll find all of our partners, but especially the Homage portion. There are two specialty URLs. That's the affiliate links. If you go click any of those, or if you click on those, you purchase anything, a portion of your purchases, it doesn't cost you anymore, but a portion of your purchases come back to support Hitting the Hardwood. So as I said, Homage, you can really find anything you want on that site. So Homage is HOMAGE.com. And thank you once again to Fantasy Sports Evo, Better Edge, and Homage for supporting Hitting the Hardwood. Now, with that said, it's here. The finals is here. The championship series is here. It's win or go home for the Lynx and the Liberty. It's do or die time. The Lynx, they're looking for their 5th WNBA championship of all time. New York's looking for their first one. So it will be a fun series. It will be an entertaining series for Lynx fans. I think it'll be a very back and forth series, just like the Connecticut series was. So look for this series to be kind of similar, but it'll be a fun series, and that's exactly what you want out of the championship series. So we'll catch up with you guys after the finals wraps up. We'll have another episode kind of looking back at the finals and the season at large. Hopefully we have a celebratory podcast, but regardless, we will have a podcast. and to kind of wrap things up on the season, as well as we'll continue as normal throughout the beyond the postseason wrapping up. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in all season. Thank you for continuing to tune in, and I hope you still tune in from here on out. But enjoy the finals. Enjoy this last series of the WNBA season. I say this, I think, every time, but it's hard to believe we're already to this point. But it's best time of the year, and this is what it's all about. So enjoy the finals, enjoy playoff basketball, and we will talk to you guys next time.